I woke up that morning with a knot in my stomach. The kind of knot you get when you know something's about to change, but you don't know exactly how. My job interview was in a few hours, and for weeks it had felt like the most important thing in my life. I had planned everything: the suit, the answers, even the route to take. But as soon as I walked into the kitchen, I knew today was going to be different. There he was, my stepdad, standing at the counter, the familiar hum of the coffee machine filling the space. He had always been the kind of guy who showed up for me through thick and thin. Ever since my mom married him, he'd been there in ways my biological father never was. He wasn't perfect, but he always tried. And that morning, he was trying even harder. "Hey kid," he said, turning around with a smile. "Thought you might need some extra caffeine today? Got you your special blend?" He always made coffee for me, but there was something about his tone that morning. It felt ... different, too careful, too gentle. I shrugged it off, thinking it was nothing more than his usual routine, trying to be supportive as I took the big step. The man had always been a bit over the top, trying to be the perfect father figure. But this felt almost too deliberate. He handed me the cup, steam swirling in the air. I took a sip. First, it was comforting, the warmth, the taste, but then something hit me. A strange, bitter undertone. My stomach twisted, a flutter of unease spreading through me. It wasn't like he'd made a bad cup of coffee. It was ... something else, something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't the taste either. It was him. The way he looked at me when I took that first sip, his eyes lingering just a little too long. The way he stood there watching me like it was some sort of test, waiting for my reaction. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. I could hear the faint sound of the spoons stirring in the cup, the soft hum of the coffee machine. I forced a smile, trying to shake off the feeling that was growing in my gut. "Thanks," I said, the word coming out a little too strained, but as I stood there with the warmth of the coffee settling into my stomach, something didn't feel right. I couldn't put my finger on it. It felt too ... intimate, like there was something hidden behind that gesture, small nagging feeling that wouldn't let go. I kept telling myself I was overthinking it. I was just nervous about the interview. But deep down, something in me knew. This moment, this coffee, it wasn't as simple as it seemed. And that feeling, it stayed with me all day. Something wasn't right. Something had shifted, and I couldn't ignore it. It's funny, how much you take things for granted until they suddenly don't make sense anymore. I never thought much about how much my stepdad had done for me over the years until that moment in the kitchen. He wasn't my real dad. I knew that. But in a lot of ways, he was everything I could have ever needed in a father. I remember when he first came into my life. I was just a kid, barely old enough to understand what it meant to have someone new in our home. My mom was always so busy, trying to make ends meet, and my dad, well, he was mostly absent. He'd disappear for days, sometimes weeks, leaving my mom to pick up the pieces. And me, well, I just learned to deal with it. But when my stepdad came along, everything changed. It wasn't love at first sight. Not exactly. But it was something different. He wasn't like the others who tried to play the role of a father. He wasn't perfect, no one is, but he showed up. I think back to all those mornings when he'd help me get ready for school, even when he didn't have to. It was little things like brushing off my coat when I spilled cereal on it, or making sure I had clean socks for the big basketball game. He never made a big deal out of it, just did it. It's always there. I still remember one rainy day when I was about 10. I'd just gotten into trouble at school. I wasn't exactly a troublemaker, but I'd gotten into a fight with a kid who wouldn't stop picking on me. I felt so embarrassed, so alone. My mom was working late, and I didn't want to tell her because I didn't want her to think I was just being dramatic. But my stepdad was the one who noticed. He sat me down, didn't even ask what had happened right away. Just said, "You want to talk about it?" And when I nodded, he listened. Really listened. He didn't lecture me, didn't tell me what I should have done differently. He just let me vent, and that was enough. And the advice he gave me? It wasn't about punching back harder or being tougher. It was simple. Sometimes people are going to be mean to you, kid, but that's on them, not you. Just don't let it change who you are. There were so many moments like that. Quiet conversations, moments where he'd pull me aside when things got tough, offering a word of encouragement. The way he always seemed to know when I needed him, even when I didn't know myself. As I got older, the advice didn't stop. He helped me with my homework when I was frustrated, listened to me when I was dealing with heartbreak, and taught me how to tie a tie for my first job interview. He wasn't the perfect father, and I knew that. He had his flaws. He wasn't always the easiest person to be around, but he was steady. He was reliable. In a world that felt unpredictable, he was the constant. The foundation I leaned on when things got hard, and I trusted him. Maybe I trusted him too much. Because looking back, there were signs I missed, small things I could have noticed, little moments that, in hindsight, seemed a little off. But back then, I didn't think to question it. He was just there, always there. And that's why when he made me that coffee that morning, I didn't question it. I didn't think to doubt him. I had no reason to. It was small things at first. Things I could easily explain away. The way he lingered a little too long in the kitchen after handing me that cup of coffee. I remember I was still standing by the counter, trying to shake off that odd feeling, and there he was, just standing. There, watching me. Not in a creepy way at least, not at first, but in a way that felt. His eyes didn't leave mine for a moment, like he was waiting for something. Maybe a sign from me, or a reaction. I told myself it was just me being paranoid. Maybe I was just nervous about the interview, or maybe the coffee was just stronger than usual. I tried to laugh it off. "Thanks, this is really good," I said, even though the taste still lingered, bitter and unsettling. He smiled. But it wasn't the usual smile I was used to seeing. It was warmer, too soft. And there was that pause before he said anything, as if he was carefully choosing his words. It wasn't like him to hesitate. Normally he'd just talk, get straight to the point, never overthink things. But that morning, it was as if he was measuring each syllable before speaking. I caught myself glancing at him a few times, trying to figure out what was going on. My mind raced with all sorts of questions, none of which made sense. Why was he acting this way? Was it the coffee, or was it just my imagination? I could feel my heart rate picking up, and the more I thought about it, the more unsettled I became. The silence between us wasn't comfortable. Normally, the kitchen would have been filled with our easy chatter, the back and forth of a father and child who had known each other for years. But today, it felt different. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the background, the slight creak of the wooden floor as I shifted my weight from one foot to the other. I glanced over at the clock. Time was ticking, and I was running out of it. I had to leave for my interview soon, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I kept brushing it off. Maybe I'm just tired, I thought, mentally scolding myself. This is just nerves. You're fine. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just nerves. There was something else in the air, something I couldn't name, but I could feel it all. Same as I finished my coffee, he stood there, still watching me. It wasn't a glance or a casual look. His gaze was too deliberate. I caught him staring, not in a fatherly way, but almost like he was waiting for me to make the first move, waiting for me to react. Waiting for ... something. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but my hands were trembling, and my mind raced, spinning in circles, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was that was making me feel so off. Everything felt too perfect. It's too still, too calculated. I told myself to focus. I had an interview. I had to leave. But as I grabbed my coat, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. The day went on, but everything after that morning felt like a blur. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I was letting my nerves get the best of me. I convinced myself to focus on the interview, to pretend, like everything was fine. But I couldn't shake that feeling. It was like I was walking through fog, everything just out of reach, unclear. Fuzzy by the time I was in the car heading to the interview, I felt it again. My stomach was off. Not the usual pre-interview jitters. This felt deeper, almost like a wave of dizziness had settled over me, the world shifting beneath me in slow motion. My hands were clammy, my head heavy. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just exhausted. I hadn't had much sleep the night before, after all. But deep down, something told me it was more than just fatigue. I kept thinking back to that moment in the kitchen, my stepdad's eyes, that lingering smile. It wasn't just my imagination. It wasn't just nerves. Something about the way he'd acted, the way he'd watched me, felt off. I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. As I waited in the lobby, the faint taste of the coffee lingered on my tongue, bitter, metallic. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. I could feel my body reacting differently, sluggish and uncoordinated. The fog in my brain was thickening. Something was wrong, and I finally allowed myself to acknowledge it. I sat there, staring at the empty cup, still in my hand, the remnants of the coffee now cold. I hadn't thought about it until now, but as I stared down at the cup, something clicked. It wasn't just coffee. It wasn't just a weird taste. I felt off. The more I thought about it, the more it clicked. What if he had done something to it? I had been so focused on the moment in the kitchen, so sure that my feelings were just nerves, but now it was undeniable. My stepdad, he'd drugged me. The realization hit me like a slap in the face. The world spun. My hands, which had been shaking all morning, trembled even more now. My fingers clenched around the cup, my grip tightening as though I could somehow prevent the truth from fully settling in. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, trying to fight the dizziness that was starting to overtake me. I couldn't believe it. No, it wasn't possible. But as I stared at that empty cup, I remembered his insistence on making me coffee that morning, his smile, the way he lingered, the way he watched me. My mind raced back to every small detail that had felt wrong, every little thing that had added up without me even realizing it. The warmth of the coffee, the odd aftertaste, the strange dizziness that was slowly seeping into every part of me. It all pointed to one thing. I was drugged. He had done this on purpose. My stepdad, the one person I had trusted, the one person I had always turned to, he had betrayed me. It felt like the ground beneath me had crumbled away. The anger, the disbelief, the horror. They all hit me in waves, crashing over me until I felt like I couldn't breathe. I stood up abruptly, almost knocking over the cup. I could feel my body swaying, like I wasn't entirely in control anymore. My mind was racing, but I couldn't form a single coherent thought. All I could do was stand there, staring at the cup and wonder, how could he do this? I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to understand how someone who had been a father to me for so many years could do this. I felt shattered, betrayed, broken. I couldn't even begin to process what had just happened. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the empty coffee cup, the weight of it all pressing down on me like a lead blanket. Time seemed to slow, stretching into an eternity. My mind couldn't process it. My heart couldn't process it. Everything felt like a blur, but the pain, the hurt was crystal clear. It burned deep in my chest, gnawing at me with every breath I took. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt like I was in a dream, like I was watching someone else's life unravel. This can't be real, but it was. The coffee, his eyes, his smile, it had all been a lie. It was all part of something I couldn't understand, something that made my skin crawl just thinking about it. I stood up, my body moving without thought. I paced around the room, my fingers running through my hair as if I could somehow pull myself back together. I didn't know how long I'd been walking back and forth, trying to shake the nausea, trying to outrun the dizzying confusion in my mind. How did I miss it? The question echoed in my head like a broken record over and over again. How had I been so blind? How had I trusted him, believed in him, when all this time he was capable of something like this? The anger came in waves, crashing against the disbelief. I felt my fists clench, my nails digging into the palms of my hands. How could he? I wanted to scream. I wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all. But instead, all I could do was sit there, hands trembling, heart pounding, wondering where it all went wrong. I tried to replay everything in my mind. The past years, the memories. I couldn't stop them from flashing before me, the times he'd comforted me when I was upset, the advice he'd given me when I was lost, the way he'd always been there for me when no one else was. I had trusted him. But now, all those memories were tainted. I couldn't unsee the way he'd watched me this morning, the way he'd made sure I had that coffee. The tenderness in his voice, the care he'd shown Mitt, all felt like a cruel joke. Was I just naive? The more I thought about it, the more the doubt crept in. Had I always been in the dark? Did I never really know him? Was everything he'd ever done just a mask for something darker? Something I was too blind to see? Was he always like this? My thoughts felt like a tidal wave crashing over me with no escape. Every moment with him was now under a microscope. Every word, every smile could. They have meant something else. Was I so desperate for love, for approval, that I had overlooked things that were never right? Had I been the fool all along? I felt a hollow emptiness in my chest, a numbness creeping up on me, slowly at first, but then all-consuming. I wanted to reach out, to tell someone, anyone, but I couldn't. The weight of this betrayal was too heavy to share, too painful to explain. How could I ever face him again? I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go from here, and worse, I didn't know if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. I don't even know how I got back to my place. Everything after the interview is a blur, my body moving on autopilot. My mind stuck somewhere between shock and disbelief. But somehow, I ended up sitting in my living room, completely alone. The silence in the room was suffocating. My apartment, usually a place where I could retreat and recharge, felt like a prison now. I couldn't even hear the usual hum of life outside, no cars driving by, no people talking on the street. Everything felt muffled, distant, like the world had stopped, and it was just me, trapped inside this. This lie. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember making the decision to sit down, but suddenly, I was in that chair, staring blankly at the wall in front of me. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to clutch the armrests, just to stop myself from trembling uncontrollably. My body was still vibrating from the shock of everything, but it felt like my mind was elsewhere, caught somewhere between confusion and pain. I couldn't wrap my head around what had just happened. What he had done? I couldn't process it. I thought I knew him. I thought he was the person who would protect me, be there for me, like he always had. But now I didn't know what to believe anymore. The walls around me seemed to close in, suffocating me with the weight of my thoughts. My eyes blurred with tears, but I couldn't even cry properly. It was as if the tears were stuck too. Why? Why would he do this to me? I couldn't understand it. The questions kept coming, but none of them made sense. And the silence, that awful silence that stretched out for what felt like hours, made the questions worse. It magnified everything. I couldn't run from it, couldn't escape it. I just sat there, helpless. I felt my breath start to catch in my throat, each inhale a little harder than the last. I couldn't breathe properly. My chest felt tight, and my heart was thumping so loudly in my ears that it was the only sound I could focus on. The pain was sharp, raw. Every moment, every piece of me was consumed by the weight of the betrayal. I wanted to scream, to let out the anger, the hurt, but it was stuck inside me, like a fist in my chest. And the more I tried to make sense of it, the more it shattered me. At some point, I ended up on my bed. I don't even know how I got there. My body just moved, collapsing onto the sheets. My face pressed into the pillow, but I couldn't hide. From the truth, I was alone. Alone. The tears came then slow at first, but then all at once, pouring down my face, soaking the pillow beneath me. It was like a dam had broken, and I couldn't stop it. All the hurt, all the disbelief, it flooded out of me. I could feel the morning light creeping through the blinds, casting long, soft shadows across the room. But nothing felt soft anymore. The warmth of the sunlight felt like a mockery, a reminder of how everything in my world had been turned upside down. I curled up into a ball, trying to shrink into myself, to make the pain stop. But it didn't. The questions kept echoing. The realization of what had happened kept stabbing at me. There was no escape. No answers. Just emptiness. I don't know what woke me up from that haze, but suddenly I was staring at the clock barely. An hour before the interview, the cold reality of the situation hit me like a slap in the face. I had to go. I had to face this world despite everything falling apart inside me. I wasn't ready for this. How could I be? My mind was still reeling from what had happened, from the betrayal I couldn't make sense of.
How could I walk into a room full of strangers and pretend everything was fine when the ground had just
Shifted beneath my feet, but I had no choice. The interview was today. This was the opportunity I'd been working for, the one I couldn't afford to mess up. I tried to move, to get out of bed, but my body felt heavy, like I was carrying weights. On my shoulders, I dragged myself to the bathroom, my footsteps echoing in the empty apartment, each one amplifying the isolation I felt. The door creaked open, and I was faced with the mirror. My reflection wasn't right. My face was pale, my eyes dull. My hair was a mess, as if the whole night had drained the life out of me. I didn't recognize myself. The person staring back at me was someone who had just been betrayed by the one person they'd trusted the most. Someone who felt like they were sinking, drowning in their own confusion and hurt. I couldn't look at myself for long. It felt like I was a stranger in my own skin. The numbness was overwhelming. I couldn't feel anything, not the pain, not the anger, not even the anxiety about the interview. It was all just ... nothing. I forced myself to breathe. In, out, slow, deep. I couldn't afford to break down. Not here. Not now. I reached for the suit I had set out the night before, my fingers trembling as I buttoned up the shirt. The movements felt robotic, detached, like I was going through the motions of someone else's life. Ow! The fabric felt foreign against my skin. My hands shook, and I had to take a deep breath to steady myself. It wasn't just the interview. It was the whole day, the whole world just demanding that I keep going, as if nothing had happened, as if everything was still the same. But it wasn't the same. Not anymore. I caught a glimpse of myself again in the mirror as I adjusted my tie. My eyes were glassy, unfocused. I looked like I hadn't slept in days, even though I'd only gotten a few hours. I was broken, but I couldn't stay like this. I couldn't let it all fall apart. Not yet. So I stepped away from the mirror, grabbed my bag, and walked out of the apartment. There was no going back. I had to face the world now. Even though the reality of what had just happened still hung heavy around me, couldn't let the betrayal stop me. But every step I took felt like a step further into a world I no longer recognized. I don't remember how I made it through the interview. I don't even remember what I said. It's all a blur, my body moving through the motions, a shell of who I was. All I could think about was getting back home, getting back to him. I had to face him. Live with this unanswered, this uncertainty gnawing at me like a silent, suffocating beast. I walked through the door, my heart in my throat. I don't know what I expected, some sign, some indication that he knew what was coming, but when I saw him sitting on the couch, flipping through the newspaper like everything was normal, it made my stomach churn. His face was calm, like he wasn't the least bit worried. Didn't he know? Didn't he realize what I knew now? The coffee, the look in his eyes, everything that had happened. I stood there for a long moment, just staring at him, my body frozen in place. The weight of what I was about to do settled on my chest like a stone. Why? The word came out almost in a whisper, but it was a scream in my mind. Why'd you do it? He didn't look up from the newspaper, didn't even flinch. His hands were steady, folding the paper in a slow, deliberate way. It felt like an eternity before he answered.
Your what?
His voice was calm. Words caught in my throat. The coffee. Why did you do that to me? He put the paper down slowly, his gaze finally lifting to meet mine. His eyes were cold, unreadable. A chill ran down my spine. I was shaking now, barely able to hold myself together. This wasn't the man I knew. The warmth I had always felt from him was gone, replaced by something else, something I couldn't even identify. It was for your own good, he said flatly, as if the words came as naturally as breathing. You needed to be calm for today. You were too on edge. I was just helping you. I felt like I had been slapped in the face. I staggered back, the disbelief flooding me again. Helping me? My voice rose, cracking. By drugging me? By making me think I was going crazy? This isn't helping me. It's controlling me. His expression didn't change, not one bit. There was no apology, no regret, just cold calculation. In his eyes, it's what I had to do. You're too much like your mother, too stubborn, too resistant to change. You needed to calm down. I did what needed to be done. Felt a knot of rage building in my chest, my fists clenching at my sides. No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to decide what's best for me. You don't own me. For the first time, a flicker of something flashed in his eyes. Something almost like annoyance, like he was tired of this conversation. He stood up slowly, his movements deliberate and measured, and I took an instinctive step back, my breath quickening. "I'm your father," he said, his voice a low growl. "I've taken care of you since you were a kid. I know what's best for you. Might not understand it now, but you'll thank me later." Father, that word felt like a slap, a lie, a mockery. I didn't even know who this man was anymore. I took another step back, my heart pounding in my ears, my mind spinning. "No, I'm done. I don't care what you think is best. I'm not your puppet. I don't need you controlling me anymore." Silence between us was suffocating. His face was still unreadable, but his jaw was clenched tight, the muscles in his neck tensing. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. The betrayal was final now. The man I had trusted, the man I thought was my father, was someone else entirely. I turned and walked out of the room, my body moving on instinct. I could feel his eyes on my back, but I didn't care anymore. I couldn't stay in that house. In that space, any longer, it was over. It's strange, isn't it? The way you can be completely shattered, like a glass hit by a hammer, and yet, little by little, you start to pick up the pieces. At first, I didn't know how to begin. I didn't know where to start, how to even begin to heal. But I did. Slowly, one small step at a time. I remember the first time I went for a walk after everything happened. The sun was out, but it didn't feel like the same sun I had known before. It felt softer, muted, like the world had changed in a way that I couldn't put into words. The air felt fresh on my skin, but every breath felt a little heavy. I walked for what felt like hours, the pavement beneath my feet steady, the rhythmic sound of my steps grounding me. Even when my thoughts were anything but, I didn't have a destination in mind. I didn't need one. I was just moving, just being. Each step felt like it was carving a new path forward, even though I didn't know what that path looked like yet. And then there were the conversations. I reached out to a few friends, ones I had been too caught up in the storm of life to really connect with in recent months. I never realized how much I had pulled away from the people who cared about me until I needed them the most. It wasn't easy. It wasn't instant, but it helped. It helped to talk, to share my pain without judgment, to feel understood. One night, sat with my best friend on her couch, the warmth of her living room, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness I had felt. At home, I told her everything about the coffee, about the betrayal, about how the man I had called a father was nothing but a stranger in my life now. She didn't have all the answers, but she didn't need to. She listened. That was enough. There were nights when I wrote in my journal, trying to make sense of everything. The anger, the hurt, the confusion. Some nights the words came easy. Other nights I'd sit in silence, not knowing where to begin. But even in the silence, there was something healing about it. The act of writing, of putting my emotions into words, was like giving my pain a place to rest. A place where I could leave it behind, even if just for a moment. I also started going to therapy. At first I resisted. I didn't want to admit that I needed help. But I couldn't carry all of this on my own anymore. The sessions weren't magic. There wasn't some big moment of clarity right away. But little by little, I felt the weight on my chest lift, and I started seeing things from a different angle. I started realizing that the betrayal wasn't a reflection of me, but of him. His actions, his choices, they were his, and they had nothing to do with my worth. I began to reclaim parts of myself that I had lost. My confidence, my trust, my sense of self. Slowly I remembered who I was before this all happened. I didn't need him to define me. I didn't need anyone to tell me what my life should look like. I could build it on my own. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about taking the pain and using it to grow, to become stronger, to build a new version of myself, one that was scarred, but resilient. I took up running again, something I hadn't done in months. The rhythmic pounding of my feet against the pavement felt like a release. Every step, every breath brought me a little closer to reclaiming the strength I thought I had lost. I had to keep going, even when it hurt. I still had bad days. Days when the weight of it all felt too heavy. Days when I would sit in silence and wonder if I'd ever fully heal. But I learned to give myself grace. Learned to accept that recovery wasn't linear. And that was okay. I wasn't broken. I was in the process of rebuilding. With every small step, I was getting closer to becoming the person I wanted to be. Stronger, more whole. The journey wasn't easy, but I was learning to walk it with my head held high. It's funny how time works. How, when you're in the middle of something painful, it feels like it's never going to end. Like the hurt will always be there, always be looming, right in front of you. But then, little by little, it fades. Not all at once, not in a grand gesture, but in quiet moments that catch you off guard. I've spent a lot of time thinking about everything that happened, the betrayal, shock, the heartbreak. I've replayed it all in my mind, trying to make sense of it, trying to understand where I went wrong. But here's the thing. I didn't do anything wrong. I trusted him, yes, but the fault was never mine to bear. Trust, that's a funny thing, isn't it? We give it away so easily because we think it's safe. But sometimes, people break it. Sometimes people we love, people we trust with everything shatter it, and we're left with the wreckage. It's easy to think that makes us weak, that we're somehow less because we were betrayed. But I've learned that trust is not a reflection of weakness. It's a reflection of our capacity to be open, to love, to give, and the fact that I can still trust, still love. That's a strength, not a flaw. I've learned that my self-worth doesn't come from anyone else's actions. It doesn't come from the approval or validation of anyone. It comes from me. I am enough, just as I am. The betrayal doesn't define me. It doesn't diminish me. It's part of my story, yes, but it's not the whole story. I'm stronger for this. Maybe stronger than I ever thought I could be. I've come to terms with it. The hurt, the disappointment, it doesn't have the power over me that it once did. It's not the first thing I think of when I wake up anymore. It's not the last thing I think of before I go to bed. I've made peace with it, and in doing so, I've made peace with myself. I'm not saying I'm over it. I'm not saying it didn't leave scars. It did. But I'm learning to live with them, and I'm learning that scars don't mean brokenness. They mean healing. As I sit here, looking out at the sunset, something inside me shifts. I feel a sense of clarity, of closure. The man I thought I knew is gone from my life, but I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I'm more aware of who I am, what I need, and what I won't tolerate. I know my boundaries now. I know my worth. I know that I am strong enough to walk through the hardest things life throws at me and come out on the other side. I don't need anyone's approval to be whole. I am whole. The future is mine to shape, and I'm ready.